Well, welcome again to a Moment with the Pastor. The last time we talked about suffering, we gave an overview of the basic Christian beliefs about suffering, that we live in a fallen world where this world is controlled by a personal God and not impersonal faith, that our God is sovereign. He's good and gracious and mysterious. We don't know why we suffer, but suffering has a purpose. That Christ has entered into our suffering, that we have the power of Christ, the living Christ in us, the hope of the resurrection as an active force in us, and we're headed to a world where we will not suffer. I know that Job, perhaps of all the people in the Bible, was the paradigm of suffering. In fact, it's become a proverb in our culture to talk about the suffering of Job. But in that book of suffering, in the midst of all of his repetitive lament and questions and even frustration and irritation with God, Job says, "As for me, I know that my Redeemer lives, and at last he will take his stand on the earth. Even after my skin is destroyed, yet from my flesh I shall see God, whom I myself shall behold, and whose eyes shall see, and not another." So he says, even though God does not relieve my suffering and I die, yet in my skin, in my body, here Job is looking to the resurrection, I will see God. Just as the book of Revelation says in the last chapter, we shall behold God face to face. This is a mind-boggling truth. Not just Jesus Christ, but God the Father we will be able to behold face to face, because we'll be in a risen and glorious and sinless state. It'll no longer be dangerous or deadly to be in the presence of God or to look into his face. And that is a hope we face, and it really is the power of our view of suffering. I want to commend you a book. It's not the easiest thing to read, but if you read through it thoughtfully and carefully, it may be, in my humble opinion, the best of all the books that I've read from Tim Keller yet. It's called Walking with God Through Suffering and Pain. And in this book, in the first section where Dr. Keller deals with the worldviews and the philosophical approaches to pain, he makes the point that of all the different cultures, only the Christian culture, only the church, has a credible philosophy and theology of pain. The Buddhists believe that pain is an illusion, that if we just get rid of our desires, pain will go away, because all pain is the result of wanting something you can't have. The Hindu believes that it's all about merit. We suffer now because we were bad people in a previous life, and through incarnation, reincarnation, we suffer less and less until we get to the point where we enter the karma, and we lose our personal state in this great spirit of the universe. The Islamic person, the Muslim, believes in fate. He has no answer to why Allah does what he does, because Allah is not a personal or approachable God who ever explains himself. He just knows that that's the way it is, and if he toughs it out, he get to be with God. The secular view that most of us are affected by is that suffering is wrong. It's unnatural. It shouldn't be. And therefore, through social engineering and science and medicine and growth as a people, we should get better to the point where we alleviate suffering, because suffering is always an interruption and an interference to life's chief goal, our personal peace, affluence, and pleasure. The Christian life says none of those things are true. Our chief goal in life is the glory of God and our desire to share in that glory when we go to be with God in heaven. Our view of Christ, the fact that our Redeemer lives after terrible suffering, and the hope that we will live in him now in the resurrection and with him in the future in heaven, is what drives us through and gives us the strength to suffer. It's interesting that the early philosophers of the early church, men like Seneca and Cicero and others, they said even though they didn't like the Christians and they thought we were maybe cultish and dangerous for society, they said these Christians suffer well and die better than the most of us. That's because we have a realistic approach to reality. We believe that the world is broken and it can't be fixed. We can never evolve or progress or improve ourselves to the point where we eliminate sin. And sin is ultimately, in one way or the other, indirectly or directly or just substantially as an undergirding power in the universe, the cause of all suffering. The way for us to get rid of suffering is to be sinless. And that's exactly what God promises in Jesus Christ. Someday we will. And the suffering we face now in this life, whether it's due to our own sin or the sins of other people or something that appears random, is meant to sanctify us, to work out in us God's good pleasure as he's willing and working in us. So take comfort in Job's statement. It's your faith, your profession of faith. Your Redeemer lives. And when your skin has been used up by suffering, you will rise someday and you will see Jesus Christ face to face. Until that day, and until I see you again, God bless you. Have a great week.